Alex, if you are trying to, as a business, implement endless customers or really any substantive change in your business, there are two things that you have to have in place that seem easy, but a lot of businesses are falling short with:
Well, I definitely want to talk about those two things. What are they?
accountability and discipline.
All right, let's get after it. Welcome back to Endless Customers. My name's Alex Winter, and today we are joined by Brian Casey, a head coach here at Impact. Brian, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Good to be back.
Good to have you back, man. It's great to see you. How's everything going?
It's good. It's starting to turn into summer, so
Yeah.
I have like more incentive to like go outside and do things afterwards. So life is good.
The sun stays up longer. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, man. I love it. Well, today we have a really great topic, and this is one that I think you're perfect for because you train and you coach a lot of companies in different industries and different backgrounds. But we're talking about accountability and discipline today, and that may seem like basic to some people, but I don't think people realize how important these things are fundamentally in order to have like long-term success. So, we talk about like we have same day delivery with Amazon Prime. We have streaming services we can watch from our couch. Everything's at our fingertips. There's like this instant gratification, and we live in like a very fast-paced world. But should we really be having the same mentality and expecting the same thing when it comes to results from our sales and from our marketing efforts?
Yeah, it's a tough question because the answer is sometimes, and it depends. Ultimately, there's certain things that you could do that are going to give you very quick results. If we talk about, paid social or paid on search, or if we're talking about like launching a tool that's going to immediately start to give us leads, we could do those things. So there's some quick hitters, and then there's things that are foundational that are going to take a while that you're going to live off of in a sustainable manner for years. So those things generally are the ones that do take longer to create and develop the foundation for.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. And since we're talking about that, or at least that's what I want to focus on, because I feel like with They Ask You Answer, and we start to talk about endless customers and gaining traction with having an endless flow of customers with your business, you have to think long term, and you have to think about digging in a little bit more than some of those quick hits and those quick wins that you can get. And those are great things, but longevity wise, you really need to lean into it more. So when we start to talk about gaining traction with sales and marketing, it tends to take more time. Why is that? Or like, why should that be the case?
Yeah. So those things that I mentioned that are the quick hitters, those are the things that are generally pay to play. So if you're talking about Google Ads, it's like, yeah, you can put money in and you can get some money out. And if those are profitable, like that probably is a part of your long-term strategy. The thing that we're talking about that does take more time is the stuff you don't have to necessarily pay for. It's articles and content and a website that brings people in. And that takes a long time to develop because ultimately you have to have a lot of different mechanisms and ways that people can find you and come back to your website. And ultimately, every piece of content that we create, every video that exists on YouTube or on the website, every time we make an optimization to a part of a website, the goal is we're building this future state uh, that will continue to be iterative, but this future state of a lot of entry points, a lot of different ways for people to find you. And it's not as if everyone has the exact same question that leads them to your website.
Right.
Everybody takes a different path. So building this foundation of content and having a website that really helps someone to be able to make a decision is a long process. There's a lot of different angles you got to consider.
Yeah, and I totally agree that you have to meet people where they are, and everyone finds information and digest information differently. Some people like to be on their phone, some people like to be on their computer. There's different apps. There's so many different ways. So it's really important to be thinking about how everyone's going to meet you or get to know your brand or your product or your service. But I also think there's a lot of companies out there too that don't even have some of these things in place. Like you're talking about iterating on your website and how important your website is, and I couldn't agree more. But some companies that are just starting out or that maybe are a referral type business might not even have a website. So they have to start to build these things first before they can even really start diving in deeper onto what you're talking about. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, there's several companies that we have talked to, whether they be a prospect or they end up being a client, that have not had to focus on their website. And they're getting to a point where things are starting to level out, and it's not able to scale. The business isn't able to scale how they want or into the markets that they want, or they have new products and those products aren't able to go to the same market and they're trying to find a new market. That's when the dynamic of like today's modern customer using the website starts to appear, and have them say, oh, um, we're not going to be able to do what we have done historically. We do have to find a different mechanism for it. So I think it's totally fair to say, like, there's a lot of people who probably haven't thought about their website. And if your website's not your number one salesperson, your number one sales tool, you're probably missing out.
For sure. No, for sure. So for people out there that are, there's some, and I know we're speaking generally because there's so many different stages and potentialities of like where people could be in their journey, whether they have a site, they don't, the size of their company, their industry. But generally speaking, what are some things that business leaders and business owners can do to speed up this process, or at least to start the process and get the wheels turning so that they can get into a better place?
Yeah. So let's say you don't have someone on your team who can create a video or can write an article right now. Like, that's a common place that we find companies in, is they've never had a content creator in house, or they've outsourced it historically.
Right.
One of the quickest things you can do is say, like, who cares about the formality of it? There's never been a lower barrier to entry for video. And if I can imagine a question or a concern that's going to come up in my sales process, and just record a quick video on my phone without having to do any editing, and I can send that in the sales process, I don't have to have someone do that. We can be scrappy. And depending on your industry, depending on like the savviness of your consumer, maybe that does, maybe it doesn't work. But for the vast majority of businesses that we talk to, that we work with, um, getting scrappy and just creating a piece of content, or sitting down and just hammering out like your thoughts and putting into an article that doesn't even have to be well refined, with the intention that you're going to be able to use it in the sales process to educate a prospect, or to answer a question, or to get ahead of a concern before it becomes something that ends up having them ghosting you. Those are things anybody can do, and do quickly, without having to think about, we just don't have the bandwidth to do it. We don't have the people that know how to write videos. We don't, or write articles or shoot videos. Like, that's not a skill we have.
Right.
All you have to do is be able to communicate what you do know, and be able to send it in the sales process. And that's generally where we see the quickest wins, is if you have a sales team that adopts a culture of content, that really takes it seriously in terms of their job being, I'm a teacher. I'm here to help educate you and allow you to make the right decision. And I'm going to be here to guide you. If you want my feedback, I'm going to give you a recommendation based on what I feel in diagnosing where you're at. But outside of that, I'm going to let you lead, and I'm going to give you the education to do it. That helps the entire thing happen very quickly, is when the sales team has adopted that mindset and they know that content's a big part of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there's times where that can happen organically, and there's times where that can happen internally in a company. And as the leadership, or as the leader, or as being part of the leadership team, that's the driving force of making those relationships and bridging those gaps in order for that to happen. But what if someone's struggling with that? What if, like, historically sales and marketing sometimes tends to butt heads, and they tend to be in different lanes or different sandboxes, whatever you want to call it. When a business owner or like a marketing manager, or somebody's in a seat where they're struggling to make that happen and bridge those gaps, what advice do you give? And at what point do you go like, okay, maybe you can't do this internally and you need some help from somebody outside to help bring in these ideas, or help with accountability and keeping people, disciplined?
Yeah. So ultimately, the thing that generally is true about the companies that break down those traditional barriers between marketing and sales is that they are meeting with each other, and they're having honest conversations about where they're at from a deal standpoint, what deals are moving through the pipeline, what deals are stalling. They're having honest conversations about why they didn't close. And it's not just like, we were too expensive. We're talking about why it was too expensive, or what led them to believe that it was too expensive.
Right, like really getting under the hood.
Understand. Yeah. What did they not understand from a value standpoint, to the point where their cop-out answer was, it was too expensive? So that's one thing that everybody can do is get your marketing content creating team in your sales meetings. We historically at Impact have called them revenue team meetings. But ultimately, I view those as sales meetings that marketing is privy to, because that's some of the best advice and guidance you can give to your marketing team is these are the active deals we're working on. These are the conversations we're having. And uh, this is where we're struggling. This is where we could use your help. Now, oftentimes I think the idea and concept of that is easy to think about, getting your sales team and your marketing teams in the same room. When it comes to actually having the conversations, um, a lot of people struggle. A lot of people struggle to have the marketing team be able to hear things that are happening on the
Yeah.
sales team and just walk away with takeaways and know how to solve those problems.
Right. And then reversely, it feels like I feel like sales teams tend to be like, marketing's making stuff that I can't use in my sales process or in the conversations I'm having. So there's a disconnect there. Like historically, there's a disconnect there, and it happens a lot. It's even happened here internally at Impact at times as we've shifted the business or changed certain service lines. But those revenue team meetings or those meetings where you get sales and marketing folks together, that is really the differentiator. And I can't tell you how many times I thought we were making content that was really creative and really cool and wonderful, and maybe it was all those things, but it wasn't helping our sales team close more deals. So to be able to be privy to those conversations, it unlocked all these new ideas and all these new potentials for content that we had never even entertained before.
Yeah. And from a sometimes teams are going to organically be able to do that, and it's going to click.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time you need someone to moderate that process. You need someone that is going to ask the hard questions. And when I say hard questions, oftentimes I find myself asking the seemingly stupid questions that it's just like, this is where I have a knowledge gap. And I know that I'm not exactly in your space in a day-to-day sense, but I don't know why you would create that piece of content based on what you just heard. And then they're like, oh. So oftentimes I find myself being the consumer or having the mindset of the consumer where they're getting very stuck into the, like, this is our language. These are the conversations that we have. There's a lot of assumptions and a lot of um, just misguidance in terms of what the consumer's actually thinking, feeling, even sales team members. So it is really helpful to have someone come in and just ask the dumb questions and then have to that often makes everybody like reframe or rethink about how they were thinking about it in the first place.
No, that's a great point. And I think that's a great segue too, with like when you're that close to something, if you're in the trenches on the sales team, the marketing team, if you're living and breathing that company and that culture all day, every day, sometimes it's hard to take a step back and look at yourselves from an outside perspective and look at yourselves like how a consumer or a potential customer would look at them, which is why having a coach or a trainer or somebody that's not part of the organization might be a really good value add to gain that perspective. And that's what you do on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, it's perspective. And it's also like the beauty that I get is I don't work in an industry.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I can come in and I can take something that's worked in a B2C capacity and apply the same principle to a B2B2C company that's selling to major manufacturers, because the principles are the same, but ultimately the shared knowledge and being able to pass along the same principles to different applications oftentimes just changes the way that companies that we work with do business from a sales standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool to be able to say like, hey, I know this is potentially going to sound really stupid, but there's a roofing company in Myrtle Beach that did this. And the way that I think it would apply to your business is in this sense. And they're like, wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We would have never thought of that because that's not how everybody else in our industry sells.
Yeah. That's really innovative and really cool ways of approaching it and just bringing in different ideas to cross-pollinate and see where it can take you and see where it can take your company. Speaking of that, like I said, you work with a lot of companies and you coach and train a lot of people on this. Do you have a story, or have you seen businesses that like start off super excited and they're bought in, they read the book, they're ready to go, they want to start seeing these results, and maybe they start off great, but then they start to taper? Or maybe they read the book and they thought they could do it themselves and they started off okay and then it starts to taper. And like, can you just share some of those experiences with us and like where it tends to fall off and how to get those people back on track?
Yeah. So there's a couple like scenarios where that typically happens. Like ultimately, if you see some initial success, Um, you might be like, we got this. We understand it. We know how to do this and we know how to do it well. We're already seeing traffic and we're already getting leads coming through the door. Um, and when you peel behind the curtain a little bit, it it's like one article that went viral. That's not a sustainable thing. And that brought a lot of traffic in and leads back to the site. But what happens if that article, because it's not optimized, drops in ranking? Or what happens if Google is no longer being the primary source where people are searching for information and AI is taking over that component?
Right.
You lose out on that. And that's happened a lot. I mean, we've had a lot of companies that we've worked with that get really fast starts. And the conversation they end up having is like, we feel like we got this. We feel like we're good. We understand it. We're executing this really well. And they're starting well. And the unfortunate piece of that is some people, I still have access to their HubSpot portals because I was working with them. Or sometimes I'll just follow up with them and they'll be like, yeah, we just went off the rails. We thought we had it. We were kind of coasting a little bit. We got fat and happy. And now we're back to the point where we're like, what did we not know? What did we think we knew? And what did we not know that ended us being here to the point where we really need to have a conversation about getting back to basics?
Yeah, getting back to basics and getting back into that consistency piece. Because you're right, when you start to have some of those wins, I don't want to call it like you get a big head, but you start to get kind of fat and happy where it's like, oh, this is working. We got this. And that's where mistakes can happen, is when you start to get a little bit comfortable or complacent and you don't keep your pedal on the proverbial gas. It can start to go back in the other direction. So how do you help businesses with accountability and keeping them disciplined? Because we're talking about a lot of content here, right? When you own your marketing, like we're talking about with Endless Customers, it's 2 to 3 pieces of content every week, written and video. And to stay consistent with that and fresh with that and to continue doing that takes practice. It takes work.
Yeah. So at Impact, we operate in these 90-day cycles. So these 90-day cycles help us to identify like what's the work to be done. And that's our checkpoint, is every 90 days, we're going to get back. We're going to talk about how we did. We're going to talk about what we saw from a success standpoint. We're going to talk about, where do we struggle or where do we fail over the last 90 days? And let's bring some focus into the areas that we fell short in. And if we did everything, or if we got really close to getting everything on our list knocked out, that's when we know it's like we have the conversation of, do we let this marinate and kind of double down on this? Or do we feel like it's actually time to add something more to the plate? Because from an Endless Customer standpoint, it's not just, publishing content. There's a lot of components that go into having your website and your company be the most trusted voice in your space. And it can be very easy and reductive to say, like, we know how to publish content. We're doing that. That Endless Customers, they ask you answer thing really well.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with that. And I think too that this is something that I love about Impact, and this is like a shameless plug here, but it's the truth. We don't stick with clients if they're not willing to put in the work. So like you as a coach, if you're in an agreement with a client and you keep showing up to your bi-weekly calls or your weekly calls and they're not doing the work and they're not staying consistent, we tend to back out of those deals because it's not going to help them. It's not going to help us. It's not going to help anybody. So there is an agreement of like, we're going to put the work in and we're going to put the time in and we're going to invest this time because there is ROI if we do it, but you have to stay consistent with it. 'Cause if you don't, it's just not going to work. And we don't want to waste anybody's time. So that's a big component of this too. And I'd love for you to share a story if you can. Like, do you have a business or somebody that maybe was struggling with the discipline a little bit or needed some accountability and you maybe had to be a little tough with them, but over time they really got it locked down and they've gone from A to B and have just grown or like have really got it dialed in?
Yeah. So I have one like accountability type story and then one perseverance type story.
Love it. All right, cool. Let's start with the accountability one. That's great.
I'm gonna start with the perseverance.
Oh, you're gonna okay. Switch it up on me.
Yeah. So insurance company that we work with out of Central New York, they know who Barry Insurance is. They've followed the Barry Insurance story. And they're a very similar business. And they have been doing the Ask You Answer for coming up on 18 months. And they were doing the right content. They're putting out all the right content. Um, and it was just kind of middling results. And a combination of things happened. They launched a new website that had a different URL. It had a different experience and flow to it. And instead of us being like, what are we doing wrong? The conversation like immediately became, oh, the website was like holding us back a little bit from a performance standpoint, from a user experience standpoint. And
Okay.
then everything started flowing. And I talked to them about 3 months ago, and they were mentioning um, we wrote our most policies in company history this week or this month. I
Wow.
forget what the time period was, but wrote the most policies that we've written in this time frame.
Wow.
It's like that is not the conversation that I anticipated having today, but I'm really glad that we had it.
That's great. But that means that it's working because that means that they're
It is.
writing more policies than they ever have in the past. So their website and the work that they've been putting in is clearly attracting more of their best customers.
Yeah. Um, from an accountability standpoint, um, long-standing customer that we worked with a long time ago. They're in industrial packaging, and their content writer was a very talented content writer. Um, he was consistently able to hit his production cadence, um, and there was a point where the feedback that I was giving him to try to help him create the best articles possible in terms of being found and converting, he just wasn't taking the feedback. And I had an honest conversation. I was like, look, man, we got to clear the air. There is like something between us that what I'm picking up, you're not, what I'm putting down, you're not picking up. And we had a heart to heart about it. And
That's awesome you did that though, because it sounds like maybe he wasn't, something was off. He wasn't feeling it or wasn't vibing. So you just had a very candid and honest and open conversation with him. That's great. So what came out of that conversation?
yeah, I love this story because it, almost right after that, like the tension was gone. Like we were able to just have very honest, direct conversations with each other. Um, and it pushed him out of his comfort zone as well
Mm-hmm.
to really be coached, to not just be able to rely on his own intuition and his own intelligence, which he had in spades in both of those areas. But it was really taking to feedback and being pushed to do something different than what he had been doing. Um, and he was able to figure a lot of pieces of the job out. One of the pieces that he did really well was the analytics piece. Um, and so a couple of years ago, when we did the impact awards for clients, he actually won the biggest ROI on any piece of content because he was able to tie a piece of content they did about contract manufacturing back to a deal that came in and sold for $1 million.
Wow.
And
That's
the entire
incredible.
contract packaging part of the business was new to them. They had a couple big clients that had done that type of business with them. Um, he got pushed to get out of his comfort zone. And then he's sitting here singing the praises of the content and the strategy because he can actually prove in HubSpot and Lucky Orange through these tools that a deal came in that was worth $1 million, a single deal.
Wow. $1 million off a single deal, off of a piece of content, off of one article. I mean, if that's not motivation or exciting to hear, I don't know what is. That's crazy. So there's something that you said in there that really stuck with me that I find fascinating, right? You had a quote unquote difficult conversation with him. Maybe it felt a little awkward. You were butting heads a little bit and you were like, hey, let's just talk about the elephant in the room and let's level with each other and really have a candid conversation. I love that. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I feel like there's a lot of times in companies and in organizations, whether it's sales, whether it's management, whatever the case may be, where people tend to not have those conversations or like they're afraid, there's fear, worry, doubt, concern, whatever it is, but they don't end up having those very important conversations that clearly can become a maker, potentially a breaking point in a relationship. So I know we're going a little off topic here, but this does play into the discipline of things, especially as a manager or a leader, where like, how do you force yourself to have those tough conversations that ultimately are going to lead to a really good place for everybody involved?
I think that's the biggest difference between like why I call myself a coach and why I'm not a consultant. A consultant is going to hear your kind of situation you find yourself in,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be driving that conversation. The consultant's going to give you advice.
Right.
The coach is going to tell you where you're failing and why. And it takes a certain business owner, it takes a certain mentality to say, we want to be coached. We are okay seizing some of the control in an area where there's an expert that has done this and walked businesses through this. And so anytime that I'm considering bringing on a new client, that's one of the first conversations we have is like, do you guys want to be coached? Not do you want someone who's got some intelligence that's going to answer the questions you have. It's, do you want to know when you're failing?
Yeah.
Do you guys have a culture in which we can call your baby ugly and we get through it?
Right.
And we're better off as a result of having the conversation? Or do you guys want to be told you're doing a good job?
Yeah. And that's a fundamental thing. And you have to discover that right up front. And I think that also plays into, so I know a little bit about your background. We've had some time to hang out outside of work and at events and things like that. But for everyone who doesn't know, Brian is also a coach and is really into athletics and does professional athletics and is a very disciplined guy on that side of the equation too. And I feel like there's parallels with playing sports and the discipline there when it comes to like staying fit, being in the gym and training. Yeah. That's very similar, like mentality wise, to what we're talking about right now with your business. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I coached college ultimate Frisbee, which is a lot of people who have never played ultimate Frisbee before that were just natural athletes. And in order for me to have a successful team, I have to be able to call out when we're not doing things well. Mm-hmm. And the same parallels exist in business. And where I've been playing ultimate Frisbee for 30 years at this point, and coaching businesses for almost 10. Yeah. And it's the same principles that apply of coach versus if you want a person that's going to be on your sideline just cheering you on. And I don't find extreme value in just being a cheerleader.
Totally. I think you make a better coach than a cheerleader, just saying. Not that there's anything wrong with being a cheerleader. All right, last thing, just some like closing thoughts here. I think we've had a great discussion. What is like the major takeaway for business owners, business leaders when it comes to accountability and discipline with rolling out Endless Customers, or really if you're rolling out any initiative in your business? What would you give for advice?
You got to figure out the things that you want to be true about the business. There's a lot of pieces of Endless Customers where it's like, yeah, that would be nice. Or you have the mentality of like, that would be nice. Like an example is if you have a sales team that has never really operated in a CRM, is it okay and acceptable if they're winning deals and hitting their goals to not have that be accurately reflected in your CRM? Is that something you're okay with? And for some, the answer is going to be different for every company.
Right.
But you have to first set the standards. So the standards have to be in place. So first you have to identify like, what are the standards that we're going to hold ourselves to? Second, you need to figure out like, what is our reinforcement mechanism? And for some companies, that's going to be coaching. For some companies, that's going to be internal. But you have to figure out like, what is our cadence of reinforcement? What's our mechanism for reinforcement? And what happens if people are living outside of the expectations that we've set? And I don't say this in a positive light, but there have been a lot of teams that we've worked with that have ended up turning over their sales teams.
No kidding.
Because they know where the market's heading. They know where they want to be. And they have sales team members that are like, I'm not doing that. And that would be a decision that obviously the business would have to make. We would never recommend, fire that person or anything like that. We're not HR. We're not going to step into that role.
Of course.
But establishing the standards that have to be true in order to hit your goals, figuring out how you're going to reinforce that, and then what happens if someone's not adhering to the standards.
Yeah, 100%. Great advice, Brian. Great advice. We love having you on the show. Thanks for being here. If people have questions about this, because I'm sure there's going to be some questions, how can they follow up with you if they want to pick your brain about, staying disciplined, staying accountable, and implementing Endless Customers correctly?
Yeah. The About Us page on the Impact site and my LinkedIn are probably the two best places to get in contact with me.
Awesome, brother. Thanks again for being on the show. It's great to see you.
Cool. You too, Alex. Bye.
All right. Take care. And for everybody out there watching and listening, this is Endless Customers. I'm Alex Winter. See you on the next episode.